from the Boston Globe, 1995, July 1995. Quote, Serb forces in the conquered UN safe area of Srebrenica yesterday completed one of the largest ethnic cleansing operations in the bloody 39-month-long war. Serbian television showed the genocidal military leader handing out chocolates to children and cigarettes to adults. Quote, you don't have to be afraid of anything, he said, as he guided refugees onto buses. Quote, most of them did not return. That reporting was special to the Boston Globe from Bosnia. It was filed by a woman named Samantha Powers, a reporter at the time. She was quite fresh out of college. Samantha Powers got her start as a very young war correspondent in Bosnia, witnessing genocide up close. Ultimately, her work in the field included a book called A Problem from Hell, America in the Age of Genocide. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 2003. Samantha Powers went on to become a foreign policy advisor to a young freshman senator named Barack Obama. When he became president, she became his special assistant on human rights and then his ambassador to the United Nations. Most recently, in fact, up until just a few weeks ago, Samantha Powers was the head of USAID, the agency of the U.S. government that is in charge of overseeing all of the aid and assistance the United States does around the world. And that is what the Trump administration thought would be its low-hanging fruit. The first agency they'd try to just outright destroy, even though they have no power under the law to do so. I think they thought there would be no pushback as Trump put all federal foreign aid and almost all USAID workers on ice, putting them on leave, if not firing them outright. As of last night, what remained of USAID's website has been replaced with just this, just a giant furlough notice for all staff at the agency. Joining us now is Samantha Powers. She is former administrator of USAID. Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I doubt this is where you want to be spending this evening. I really appreciate you making the choice to be here.
Of course. Thank you for caring about this.
I know that you're still in touch with a lot of your former colleagues and employees at USAID. Beyond what we're seeing in the headlines, what else can you tell us to help us understand what's actually happening here?
Well, you can imagine when you suddenly in your inbox find a termination notice or a leave of absence notice that you didn't expect to get on a flawed predicate that you're doing radical leftist insubordination, it's pretty jarring. And because there's so many lies and falsehoods circulating, and so many claims that people are sort of not with the program, I think people are just completely dislocated. There's no stable ground on which to walk. And then, of course, most of them have been laid off, so they're worried about how they're going to pay the bills and how they're going to make rent. But maybe the part that is the most striking and, for me, inspiring, if not surprising, having worked there for 4 years, is that, the people who work at USAID did not come to work at USAID for the money. The civil servants, the foreign servants, the contractors, they came to USAID because they wanted to make a difference in the world, because they saw America's interests as tied up with the interests of people, vulnerable people around the world. And so even as they're struggling to figure out how to make rent, all of a sudden, they're most struggling with the fear that so many millions of people who relied on us as a country, on USAID as an agency, but on them as individuals, that those individuals out in the world have no place to turn. And indeed, they're showing up and finding health clinics shuttered and soup kitchens closed, and advisors who were helping governments renegotiate debt with China, those advisors, now taken off the books. So just the wreckage in the world is what the USAID staff that I'm in touch with are carrying with them. That's what's keeping them up at night, as much as the question of, what am I going to do tomorrow, and how do I take care of my family?
Let me ask you about that sort of outward-looking part of this calculation that I think you just alluded to a little bit there. Even as we're focusing on the human cost and what's happened to all these careers and what's happened to these individual programs, even just trying to, because USAID works in 120 countries, it does so many different things. I think it's hard to get one picture in your head of what it's done. But we do, when looking outward from the program, have a very clear picture that is summed up in a New York Times headline tonight. Foreign strongmen cheer as Musk dismantles U.S. aid agency. Leaders in Russia, Hungary, and El Salvador welcome the Trump administration's assault on USAID, which many authoritarians have seen as a threat. We've also, of course, seen the Kremlin cheering Elon Musk at destroying this agency. Why do authoritarian leaders hate USAID so much?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. They don't like democracy. They want the United States ultimately to fail and our model to fail. And they recognize something that clearly some in the U.S. don't yet recognize, which is how vital U.S. aid is to advancing U.S. interests. And American strength resides in the goodwill we buy, but also our security resides in our ability to squash that Ebola outbreak in Uganda, to make sure that those flights that come from Kampala don't contain people with Ebola who bring that disease elsewhere. So they root against America, they root against democracy, therefore they root against USAID and are thrilled that it's the United States government itself that is taking this agency off the field. But the other reason they're cheering is that USAID does really important democracy work, really important anti-corruption work, supporting independent journalists, training them to make sure that they can go out and about and cast sunlight on what is going on in those countries. So a lot of the elections, for example, that Maddow stole or that Putin rigged, the documentation of that happens because brave Venezuelans or Russians are out there willing to document that, and some of that training, over the years has come from the United States and specifically from USAID. So democracy programming is a small part of the overall enterprise of development and humanitarian response, but it's one that definitely gets under the skin of the dictators.
It does feel like the firings and putting people on leave in a mass way does appear to be pretty blatantly illegal and in violation of all sorts of legal protections that people have who work for agencies like USAID and other parts of the US government. It also seems like the overall effort to shutter the agency, to fundamentally turn it into something else, to move it from being an independent agency inside the State Department, to get rid of it, just appears to be pretty blatantly against the law. We know that a new lawsuit has been filed essentially to challenge that element of what the administration is trying to do. As those legal fights get underway, though, for the individual people in the agency and for the efforts to attack the agency itself, are you heartened at all? Do you think it matters that people are standing up for USAID and foreign aid, turning up at demonstrations and making a stink about it, not only in Washington, but all around the country?
I think it matters massively. I mean, as you said, I think in your introduction, the calculated bet here was that this was for foreigners. And again, the people who are trying to destroy the agency aren't people who know anything about what USAID does. They don't know that we deliver magical peanut paste made in rural Georgia, that Georgian farmers care passionately about being part of providing this paste to severely malnourished kids in sub-Saharan Africa, that they take pride in bringing those kids basically back to life by virtue of providing this so-called ready-to-use therapeutic food. They don't know, these people who are trying to destroy USAID, how essential the investments in the economies overseas have been to U.S. companies' ability to find markets. They don't know that American farmers, that USAID buys about $2 billion worth of farm commodities from American farmers. They're starting to learn about it because you're seeing even red state senators speaking up on behalf of their farmers. So there is a lot of misinformation, and it's all misinformation about what USAID does, about the lion's share of the investments that we make overseas, about who we're helping. And so it's not just about the activation that we're seeing happening in the Congress and all around the country. It's about bringing forward these truths about who we are as a nation, and why from the American people these investments are made, because that is USAID's slogan. It's not USAID the government, it's that these investments come from the people and they make that difference. And that's hearts and minds When we go and seek to open up a market for a U.S. company, it matters that we have bought that kind of goodwill by virtue of the lives that have been saved and affected. But it also matters for U.S. security. And I think there's just not a fundamental appreciation of that. It matters in the strategic competition with the PRC, with China. There's not an appreciation of that, again, by the individuals who are taking out this agency. But the truth is on the side of the agency, the facts for the American people, for the American economy, for those jobs that are going to be lost and can now be saved if people activate, and particularly if Republicans join with Democrats in speaking up on behalf of efforts that have had so much bipartisan support for so many decades.
Ambassador Samantha Powers, who until recently was the administrator of USAID, really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time tonight. I know this is a profoundly difficult time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, much more news ahead. Stay with us.